Welcome to Northwest Tech Show. I'm Dave Duncan, and this is a show where we talk about technology and how a better understanding of it can help you have better outcomes at home, at work, and in your civic engagements. We're going to kick things off, as we like to do, with a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at Twit TV.
This is Twit.
As is the case for the news of the 12th Zero Day so far this year, we know what that is without any additional description. Last week, Chrome's Emergency Zero Day update, that is to say last week when we talked about it, left us at 93.0.4577.82, but that one didn't last long. Last Friday, Chrome was updated to 94.0.4606.61 with a fix for a single high-priority update for, yes, yet another zero day that Google says, thus zero day, they are aware of being exploited in the wild. Now, one thing we're going to be hearing a lot about this week, because boy, are they becoming prolific, and that's Google's so-called tag team, their threat analysis group. They're responsible for this one. They found it in their own product. It's being tracked as CVE 2021 37973. It's a use after free, which we know means that some way was found to access memory after the garbage collector had released some memory back to the system, believing that it was no longer necessary. There are languages where you the programmer, explicitly asks for and receives an allocation of memory from the operating system. There are languages where memory is allocated statically, so your program just always has it, typically within its own memory space. And then there are so-called automatic languages where you just start to use some memory and something underneath says, oh, and like quickly creates some memory to hold your use. And the idea is that it's supposed to figure out when you're no longer going to use that anymore, because it depending upon what you're doing, how long this program is going to be running, the system can't just keep automatically allocating memory every time it sees that you're about to need it, without it also on the back end figuring out, okay, he's done with this now, I can let it go. And there are many instances where, like if memory is allocated inside of a subroutine, when you exit the subroutine, the presumption is, okay, anything you had allocated while in this subroutine should not be accessible outside the subroutine due to what's known as scoping in languages. So as soon as you go out of scope, then the operating system could say, okay, he's done with this, and let it go. Anyway, it is complicated. It's another one of those things that is a great convenience for the programmer, and it comes at some cost to the system of providing that convenience. And it can be a little error prone. So we keep seeing these use after free, which means that after the memory was freed, there was still some means for a malicious programmer to get access to that memory. And who knows, I mean, the memory could be reused by the operating system, and so they'd have access to some memory that was now in use by another process. And that's a big no-no, because that breaks inter-process isolation. So, the problem is we keep finding these, yet we keep writing new code that introduces new problems. So we're the hamster on the little wheel that is never ending. Anyway, the Google tag team found the problem. They had discovered and reported the flaw to the Chromium people, and it turns out, they found it because a bad guy had found it already and was actually exploiting what I just described, tricky as that is, found a way to exploit it in the wild for their, nefarious purposes. So, quick push out a new version of Chrome. One more use after free problem is now gone. Let's hope we don't see any more soon. And Google doesn't give us any more information about this because they want everybody to update before they talk about it. That means that it ends up becoming sort of historical interest only. And then does anyone care anymore? No. So they're probably never going to tell us. And again, no one will care. But for those keeping score at home, this brings the total year-to-date 0-day tally for Chromium to 12. So
Wow.
Since we're still in month 9 until next podcast, and again, I give Google serious props for being as responsive as they are. We're going to be talking about in fact, this podcast is named after a real mess that Microsoft has known about for some time. And as the case with the proxy logon Microsoft Exchange problems and the printer nightmare problems, where they've known for 3 months or 9 months, respectively, and did nothing about it. Google jumps on this stuff and gets them fixed in a matter of days. So, I'm glad that so many browsers have decided to go the Chromium route, and especially Microsoft's browser. What was interesting was that the flaw appeared. Remember, I talked about how they keep writing new code? Well, this is in new code. It was in the so-called Portals API. And I thought, what's the Portals API? Turns out it's a new web page navigation system that enables the user's current web page to show another page as an inset thumbnail. And then upon some action, maybe you click on it or you move your mouse over it or who knows what, it performs a seamless transition of that little thumbnail to become the next page by smoothly zooming the thumbnail to full size to replace its parent page and to become the new top-level document. And I have to say that there's a bunch of examples. If you go to web.dev/hands-on-portals, so https://web.dev/hands-on-portals, you'll see some examples of this. And it's kind of slick, since it's the sort of effect that we're used to seeing on fancy OS platform UIs. And once it catches on, I'm sure we're going to be seeing it all over the place, often. And maybe more than we want to, since it is a bit cutesy-poo. But, as I was looking at it, thinking, okay, here's another, bit of eyewash for us. It's just going to make GRC look even more Stone Age than it already is, but that's okay too. Once I get caught up with SpinRite, probably after 7.2, where we'll have operation on BIOS and UEFI and native support for all drive technologies, I might go for a change of pace and spend a little time on the website. Maybe. I have a feeling, though, that given the weird timing anomalies that we've detected with SSD reading, that's going to be too much for me to resist, and I might just switch over to work on SpinRite 8.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was Security Now 838, Chrome Monthly 0 Days. So just a reminder that the browser is the operating system for a lot of applications today. It's anything that we're doing interactively, it's often going through the browser. Even mail for a lot of people is going through the browser. And we just need to treat it as critical infrastructure. We still have people doing, let's do the new shiny feature, and then it introduces a bunch of bugs. So we need to start saying, hey, this is important. Let's treat it that way. Now, there have been some good developments in that there has been in a couple of cases, not in browsers yet, but a separation of security updates and feature updates, which to me is super important. Because theoretically, you could say, okay, the guts of this thing, how it actually works, is the security is very important. We're only going to update that to make things safer. And your feature updates can be how you use the underlying functionality. And if you make a mistake in that and you properly isolate the two, then it could have no more consequence than anyone, the same sort of isolation you have from the network. Then you have a better time, I should say. And maybe even you have an opportunity to say, hey, I want to just stick with the features I've got. I don't need the shiny new. Maybe you have a firm security layer, and then you have the shiny new layer. And when something gets important enough to people at large, then you can carefully move it into the secure layer and really, really scrutinize it. So a couple of things there that could be done. But a couple of ways of interpreting having a 0-day about every month for the last, in this year. One is that they're just getting really sloppy with the code and they're rushing out too many features. The other is they made mistakes in the past, now they're cranking down on it, and so they're discovering a lot of stuff that was what we might call technical debt that had built up in the software. So hopefully that's the case. I guess we will see if there's any flattening of the curve, so to speak, for new 0-day exploits. All right, with that, let's move to the next clip. Another Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. This is This Week in Tech 840, Slow U.S. Broadband.
This is Twit.
Carl Bodie wrote an article saying, this is great news. More communities are building their own broadband. Why? Because of COVID? How does that happening?
Well, most people don't like their regional telecom giant, whether it's, Comcast or whoever it is, and most people only have the choice.
It's a monopoly.
83 million 83 million Americans live under a broadband monopoly. Here in Seattle, which is, Silicon Valley North, I have the choice of one provider, Comcast.
Isn't that terrible? It's awful.
And this has been going on for 25 years, literally. We've thrown billions and billions and billions of dollars at this problem. And so I think a lot of these local towns and cities have just gotten incredibly frustrated. So there's about 1,000 different communities that have, in the last decade or two, built their own broadband access that routinely winds up being cheaper, faster, more reliable. The money that the locals spend on this service goes back into the community. The people who work for these providers tend to live in the communities they serve. So unlike a lot of these regional monopolies, the money is staying there and they're more accountable to the locals. So
I'm surprised because I know that when Philadelphia tried this, that they were immediately sued, and state legislatures across the country started passing bills prohibiting municipal broadband. But this is despite those bills.
Yeah, there's 17 states that currently have passed laws restricting towns and cities from getting into the broadband business or building their own broadband networks or expanding those networks. But I think COVID really showcased when you saw toddlers like sitting on the sidewalk outside of Taco Bell. To try and get online for class. This has always been a problem, but COVID really accelerated, the awareness. So it really has driven some action.
Good. And so those 17 states, forget it.
It depends. Each state has a different variation. Sometimes it'll be an outright ban on building your own local network, and sometimes it'll be worded in a very convoluted way to make it as difficult as possible to raise funds or to expand, or you can't market in this zone, or you can only, if it's like a lot of these networks are built on the back of the local power utility. And so what
Chattanooga did that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the fastest and cheapest fiber providers in the nation.
They have gigabit. Yeah.
But what a law will sometimes do is say you can't expand this network outside of the local utility footprint. Some of the laws will say something like that. And there's no real reason for it outside of the fact that the regional telecom monopolies, who literally ghostwrite most of these laws, just told the state representatives that they didn't want that to happen. And this stuff is super popular. It's bipartisan. There's no excuse for the failure that I've seen in the last 20 years.
The ideological argument is that, well, you wouldn't want government to compete with private industry.
Yeah, but the counter argument is that, a lot of these companies have had 20 years to wire these areas, and they don't want to because the return on their investment is low. But at the same time, they don't want anybody else building their own broadband networks because they might want to go back there someday.
Yeah, we may someday. Yeah.
It's a very cake and eat it too kind of thing for these companies.
Oh, what a surprise.
And,
I'm just thinking about when I ran for Congress, I got to know so much about local budgeting, like more than I ever would have thought. And like here in Dedham, where, a friend of the show, Paul Thoreau, used to live here too.
Right.
We canceled our trail this year, like a just walking trail, because COVID has destroyed our municipal budget. If you go over to poorer areas of Massachusetts, like Brockton, I can promise you the Brockton tax base is not, gonna like go for a bunch of broadband development right now. So I'm for you. I'm with you in principle, but I'm also thinking about the people that need it most, and thinking about towns like Whitman where they're like, hey, we're just going to have our library open for 3 days a week because we have no money. We're going to have a 4-day-a-week police department. And, I'm thinking about, like, is it really a feasible thing all through the United States? Like COVID is going to affect our local revenues for years.
Yeah, it's not like a silver bullet where you could just do this in every nation. And there's also like multiple varieties of different types of ISPs that are built out of this model. Some will be on the back of the local power utility that won't use taxpayer money at all. Some will be a private public partnership that, just works with a local provider like Google Fiber or somebody to deploy to the area. So it's not all just tax-based driven models. I mean, there's a wide variety of models they can explore.
Here in this little town of Petaluma, about 60,000 people, there was a big initiative about 5 years ago to put in community Wi-Fi. Initially, Comcast was going to help, but then they bowed out. Then another provider was going to help. They bowed out. They put some stuff up, but it didn't work. It's gone. Yeah. And I think it's just a hard thing to do, and there isn't a lot of support from the incumbents, of course. So you really have to have a leader, a civic leader who's going to really push it through.
Yeah, it's like any, I mean, one of the things the telecom companies will do is they'll just say that these are automatic taxpayer boondoggles and you should never try it. But I mean, they're just like any other business plan, and they require a good leader and a sound plan. And look at Chattanooga that built its own fiber network when Comcast refused to. They've been ranked consistently one of the most affordable, fastest internet providers in the country.
Well, the other good reason to do it is evidence shows everywhere that incumbents were challenged by fiber, whether it was Google Fiber or others, that prices went down, that speeds went up, and even in some communities where there's fiber up to this road, you could see the prices go up as soon as the fiber from the other company is not available. It's like, no competition, great, we're going to raise the prices. It's
and the thing
blatant.
the thing that's frustrating is like the approach to ban these entirely. We've spent literally about 25 years where the U.S., ever since we broke up Ma Bell, the U.S. telecom policy has basically been to do whatever the dominant regional monopolies want. I mean, with some exceptions occasionally. Like net neutrality was an effort to say, okay, maybe we should apply some very basic rules to these companies. And anytime anybody tries to do that, the companies get Congress to freak out. Trying something different will destroy the internet. That's basically their line. But
good news is we live in this great country. We have the best internet in the world, right?
Incorrect. I'm afraid we rank pretty much mediocre on every metric that matters, whether you're looking at
the country that invented the internet, 14th place globally.
Yeah.
In speed.
Yeah. We're both 14th in fixed line broadband and 14th in wireless. And I think
at least we're consistent.
We actually got a little worse in fixed line broadband despite a lot of fiber. So.
Wow, we're slower than Canada, Italy, Saudi Arabia. The argument I hear when I mention this is, well, those countries have federally supported or federally owned, government-owned internet companies or telecom companies. Is that always the case?
No, I don't think Canada has too many of those. I mean,
no, Canada's got the worst That's funny because Canada's got the worst telecom companies. Rogers,
yeah, they're very similar.
They're
very similar to us. They're regional monopolies that have been allowed to write laws for literally 20 years, and then people stand around with a silly look on their face, wondering why things are spotty and expensive and slow.
Okay,
well, I really support just anything. It seems logical to allow these little niche solutions to thrive, so that we can have any kind of creative solution.
Yes,
100%.
It's common sense.
And hey, at least we may only be 14th in terms of speed, but we are the least expensive, right, Carl?
No, pretty much one of the most expensive countries for both wireless and wired.
You're telling me we pay more and get less?
Yeah, and then there's that customer service, which is
God, I love them. I think I saw a survey once. People would rather have a heart attack than call Comcast customer service.
These companies are literally, These companies are literally ranked worse in customer satisfaction and service than pretty much any industry in America. And when you think about the fact that that includes banks, that includes insurance, that includes airlines, I mean, that's a feat. And it's been pretty consistent. There's been some minor improvements from some of these companies in the last few years, but it's not great.
You could argue that maybe there's something flawed in our democracy because actually it's not just broadband; it's also medical. This is a lot of areas where we should be number one.
Yeah, I mean,
just aren't education.
When I spent a lot of time covering these companies, I would look at the way the success they had writing bills, and there's literally some of these companies effectively control state legislatures. They can get the bills passed. Any telecom laws that are passed are written by them, ghostwritten by them. And that's, I started learning that. And then like you said, you start looking around at healthcare and other industries, and it's pretty much the same.
I just thank goodness we're really strong on women's reproductive right. Oh, no. Just forget it.
I'm gonna start drinking on this show.
No. We're gonna get upbeat. Let's take a deep break.
I really do think it's a positive change that these communities are taking.
No, I agree. I've been a long-time supporter of municipal broadband. I think it's brilliant. I think it's right. We really ought to do it, and every community ought to look at it. In fact, a good friend of mine was an activist, would go around helping cities set this up. I really think it's the right thing to do, and it helps everybody. It's good for the economy. And frankly, it helps these incumbents because they're going to do a better job because they're getting competition finally. They can't just rest on their laurels or whatever.
Makes them just...
now that all of our jobs are on Zoom. I've taken more Zoom meetings.
Yeah, we need it.
The last month than my entire life.
Is Starlink going to be the solution for this? Is it going
to? I think anything that applies a little pressure on these companies are good. The problem with Starlink is going to be a capacity one. When you figure there's somewhere between 20 and 40 million Americans that have no access, and another 83 million that have a monopoly, that live under a monopoly. And Starlink, I think, with their initial load of satellites, is going to reach about 500 to 800,000 customers.
They did just ask the FCC for approval for a total of 30,000 satellites.
Yeah, with a maximum capacity of 42,000 satellites, they should be able to reach about 6 million potential customers.
So it's still very limited. I didn't realize it was going to be that limited.
I mean, come on, y'all. You read the Verge piece on this, like looking at Starlink and what the promises are and what the reality is. It's not good. It's terrible.
Neela Patel writes, broadband dreams fall to earth.
Yeah. If you love reading mean reviews of products, and I do, please read this. It is so, it's a disaster.
Yeah, he actually ordered it and talks about his experience. Because after reading this, I wanted to try it, so I'm on the waiting list for $500 in satellite equipment and $100 a month in service. But I just want to, at some point, I want to be able to just put it on my back and travel and stuff, but I don't know.
I mean, if your only option is satellite broadband or
this
nothing
is better
at all,
than anything.
It's going to be a big
better than
upgrade,
Exceed, better than Wild Blue. Yeah, it's the best.
The problem is there's limited slots, and I think Elon Musk fans are going to gobble up a lot of those to put satellites on their Cybertrucks and stuff. And,
The sad thing is, as ridiculous as that sentence sounds,
it's true.
Actually, is pretty believable and is true.
I think it is.
I
The
feel
other
very
major
attacked because that was my plan. That was going to be my sixth car. Was a Cybertruck. Oh,
with flags, it'd be nice.
Yeah, what's going on with the Cybertruck? I feel like I haven't heard
I
anything.
think they changed
about
the design a
how
little bit.
that's
Like he
going.
backed down a little bit on the design. I'm
Yeah,
not
I think
sure.
they delayed again. Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought I remember reading another delay.
Yeah.
The other problem with Starlink is that, the affordability thing, like $100 a month plus a $500 charge is not exactly appealing to somebody who's struggling in rural Wisconsin. Like
Well, I know.
they need
No, I know.
service tiers at around $40 a month.
Yeah.
And so it's not really helping those people. I mean, if they can afford it, maybe. And then there's the debate about the light pollution in the night sky, which is a whole other layer that
As Nilay Patel says, people so desperate for good internet that they say F telescopes.
That's right.
Screw them.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was This Week in Tech 840, talking about the ridiculously slow U.S. broadband. And, actively fighting to stay that way. 17 states have laws restricting cities from getting into providing broadband, limiting expansion of existing municipal broadband. A lot of these come through power companies and saying, well, just limit it to where your power goes and don't do anything else, man. Keep it as small as possible. And as I said, not only have they had, a couple of decades to roll out better broadband or more widespread broadband, but they have, when they've come before Congress to, change their rates or request mergers and all this stuff, they keep making promises about, oh yeah, we're going to do all this stuff. And then they wander off with their favorable decision in hand and, completely ignore their promises. So, oh yeah, we're working on it. Yeah, we'll do that someday. And, it really gets old. At the same time, writing, ghost writing the legislation for their, favorite, through their favorite lobbyists, and to say, hey, here's some laws you can pass that we would really enjoy. You don't want to suppress free commerce. Well, we don't have free commerce for building our roads and our power, and we have some regulation on these things. And, we need to have that for broadband. It is, especially in COVID times, but a long time before that, it's just become really clear lately, this is not optional stuff. This is critical infrastructure. And we are slow compared to the rest of the planet. So, if private enterprise is just, content to sit back on their laurels and, not actually keep up because they can as I mentioned, they can get more money from us for less service because they own the process so much. And we need to push back against that and say, no, we need this. We don't want our kids having to, we don't want to be sitting in our cars next to Taco Bell trying to take our classes because we don't have any broadband at home. To be so underserved in an area where we did the pioneering work is just particularly painful. This is a dividend that we should all have access to, and we are more productive the better infrastructure we have, the better the productivity of your country is. So maybe that would be a good thing, and you should do something about that. Right after you get done doing something about global pandemic, right? All right. Yeah, and I was a little disappointed to hear that. I was hoping, I had big hopes for Starlink as well. And who knows what it'll develop to eventually. Okay, so it will not roll out and be the solution. It's not going to be as fast as we need, and not very many people are signing up for it yet. Who knows if that's a capacity issue? I think there's a waiting list to get on it, so I guess that is a capacity issue. So, and the more satellites we put up, the harder it is to get into space. The more likely it is we'll have some catastrophic cascading failure of exploding satellites, creating particles that blow up more satellites, that do debris that blow up more satellites, until you just have this shell of debris around the planet that greatly impedes or even just stops space flight. So we're there's another line that we're walking on the tightrope. It's like we're just whistling past the graveyard, hoping that hoping but not actually doing anything about major downsides that surround us. All right, and with that, let's move on to something for fun, a little bit of a palate cleanser. This Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. This is the Tech Guy 1830, just talking about Inspiration 4 and Planet X and great space stuff.
This is Twit.
He's my rocket man. Spaceman Rod Pyle is here, author Space 2.0, editor-in-chief of Ad Astra magazine.
So let's talk Inspiration 4 briefly. I've got two stories this week, Inspiration 4 and Planet X. But Inspiration 4 came back Saturday night at a little after 7 Eastern Time.
Awesome?
You probably saw it.
I was not inspired by Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson going up and down, but I was totally excited about Inspiration 4. They raised $200 million for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. They were civilians in space, and they did it, and it was perfection. Perfection.
And let's just make sure we acknowledge Elon Musk for donating that last $50 million.
50 million.
Because he filled the gap.
Because he basically gave Jared Isaacman back his $50 million and gave it to St. Jude.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or whatever he paid.
Good for Elon. We don't know.
More than 50, but yeah, I mean, this is great PR. And Bezos, to his credit, he's been doing some really good PR work. He gave the NSS money, a number of other groups, and he did congratulate Elon on the flight. But it's still dicey between those two. But I have to tell you, I was sitting in my car because I was out when the landing was happening, and I was watching on my phone, space.com, watch it come back. And so the moment for me, great mission, loved everything about it, but the moment for me was when those parachutes opened, because that's kind of the last place where you can have a real problem, right?
I wasn't going to say anything. I watched the Netflix documentary, which is really good. It's still going on, called Countdown.
Yeah.
I was chewing my nails because those 4 people were beautiful people. I feel like they were kind of going, I mean, I'm sure their eyes were open, but especially the 29-year-old.
Are we going to the moon?
Yeah. It's scary. I think they were taking a bigger chance maybe than they really acknowledged. They put their life in Elon's hands.
If you've been watching that program, the development of the Crew Dragon for all these many years, they had a lot of trouble with those parachutes. They had a fair amount of trouble with the abort engine. It was really the parachutes. I mean, we're talking almost 30 major tests, helicopter drops, flights, you name it. I think they went from 3 parachutes to 4 early on. But even with that Mark III design, which is what they're using now, they had a lot of problems.
I was biting my nails.
We've been doing parachutes from space since 1960 with humans, 61. Yeah. Gemini and Mercury used single parachute. Apollo used 3. We did have one flight, Apollo 15, where one opened and then collapsed because it got hit by a fuel dump. But, as I've said before on the air with you, parachutes, if you talk to engineers, they're just like wild animals. You try to model them with software all you can, but they just don't behave in the real world. So I'm so glad they got it right. And this really feels like we've got, and I don't want to jinx anything by being premature, but this feels like we're real finally on the leading edge of reliable access to space for everybody, ultimately, with a machine that just works. They're going to probably use this same capsule again for the Axiom flight that's going up early next year, which has got an astronaut, Michael Alegria Lopez, flying it with 3 passengers. But this will be the 3rd or 4th use of this thing. So this is just remarkable stuff.
I just want to volunteer. If they ever need a 5th guy, I don't know. I can hold. I can hold the iPads for him or whatever. I'm just.
So you want to be an actor and an astronaut now? Is that it?
Basically, I'm living my 5-year-old dreams. I'm a kid.
Live the dream.
I'm living my dream.
Yes.
I always wanted to be an astronaut. I would do it in a heartbeat, even knowing the risk, because it's risky. But they did it. Good job.
Well, and the thing now is with you and me, you know, we're kind of in Act 3 or Act 4 or Act 7 or whatever it is of life. And as much as I'm a little more conservative than I was younger, I have fewer years left to lose now. So it kind of makes more sense.
I've done everything I want to
do it now, right?
Yeah. In fact, you know, there've been some talk about a one-way trip to Mars. I would volunteer for that. I don't need to come back. I can.
Yeah, but have you looked at Mars lately?
I know it's not. I know.
A little grim. So hey,
what's Planet X? What are you talking about?
We have left?
Oh, we got 2 and 3
Planet
minutes.
X. So
what's that?
Okay, new study come back. You know, I always look for new studies on the archives and so forth. And the study came back where they had looked at and identified a bunch of new trans-Neptunian objects. So these are chunks of rock in the outer solar system beyond the orbit of Neptune. And since Pluto is no longer technically a planet, it's considered one of these things. So this is out in the Kuiper Belt. And they looked specifically at 400 something of them and said, you know, a bunch of these have really weird orbits. And we're talking about, they're charting stuff that's between 3 and 4 billion miles with a B out there. So this is not a trivial thing. And they're looking at these orbits and saying, if they're just being affected by the sun and Neptune, we expect this kind of orbit. And if they're being affected just by the sun because they're far enough away from Neptune that they're not affected, because Neptune's pretty large, but they're not affected by its gravitation, they should be in a rough ellipse. But they've got these wacko orbits, and they're trying to plot these things collectively to say, okay, clearly there's some mass out there that's affecting how these orbit. Now, it could be
that they don't see it.
The cumulative.
They just see the effects of it.
The effects of it. So it's this kind of, you know, inductive kind of logic, intuitive logic you have to use, which is big in astrophysics. It could be the collective effects of just a lot of other loose junk out there, kind of acting like a clump. But it could also be this big dark planet that they've been kind of hypothesizing for decades. So if that happens, we'll finally have a ninth planet again. Wouldn't that be cool?
They're calling it Planet 9.
All this time.
They got to come. They can't call it Pluto because that's taken.
Yeah, but I like Planet X better because Bugs Bunny cartoons use that.
Yeah.
And it sounds kind of mysterious and nefarious. Or what was the name of Nibiru? I think was one of the names they came up with for
there's a precedent for this
planet out there
in science. If you can't explain how something's happening, you think maybe there's some, for instance, dark matter. We can't see it, but we can't explain what's, you know, the phenomena we see without something like that. In the early days, people thought there was ether, that light went through the air, and there was something. They eventually, Michelson and Morley proved it wasn't, but that was you know, that was the variable. That was X that they filled in to make sense of all the measurements. Right. And so there's a long-standing tradition of this. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it's just a bunch of stuff with rough lips. But that's what you said, right? It had rough lips.
Rough lips.
Yeah. I'm just being silly.
I know, but you're right. And I mean, so much of, and again, you know, being involved with this JPL book again this year, I read these stories, and we'll talk more about them once they release them, because they still have to go through a legal review and all that for release. There's so much stuff in there where you follow the steps they take backwards from the data to get to something that makes sense. Yeah. And it just makes my hair curl.
I love science.
Because they're really, really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smart people doing smart stuff. Yeah. Like this guy, Rod Pyle. He and I are going to Mars. The author of Space 2.0, editor-in-chief at Astra, space.nss.org. Thank you, Rod. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Leo Laporte, the tech guy.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was The Tech Guy 1830, Inspiration 4, and Planet X. So, yeah, it looks like, you know, of the various projects, you know, going into space, Elon's looks pretty good. Apparently Netflix documentary called Countdown about it. Haven't looked into that yet. This is, you know, space travel has so many difficulties. They're talking about, you know, like the parachutes or wild animals that defy computer modeling. You know, there's just so many challenges of, you know, getting human beings out of the gravity well and into an environment that is totally hostile to them to do accurate flights just across truly mind-boggling distances to survive, not only the vacuum of space, but radiation, the material science to keep something that holds together under such strains. Now, looking into reusable spacecraft and, how to make that work. It's just, this is one of the really pure challenges to human ingenuity. And the things that spin out from them are incredible. We have our whole computer and miniaturization industry is largely, spun out of, or rooted in discoveries in space travel. The things we were able to do with, the equivalent of what now would be, a pocket calculator, which itself is something that's like, oh, okay, it's about the computation of maybe an old-fashioned digital watch or something. Just incredible leveraging of the tools that we have and developing new things that have to work. We're just talking about how unreliable the consumer-grade computer programs and devices are. And then you look at what we develop for space travel. And it's like, okay, we can do it. We can make stuff that works reliably under the most unpredictable and severe conditions. And yet, when it comes to stuff that most people use, let's not bother. We want stuff to fail. We want people. We want people in the when I say we, I mean the companies. They want people in this Charlie Brown state where they always think, well, maybe this next device is the one that's going to solve all my problems. In a lot of cases, it's it's getting worse. Some of my desktop computing experiences of a decade ago kind of hit a peak where every generation that came out after it just got worse and worse and worse and more awkward and more filled with, sort of the decorative equivalent of advertising. And, this is this is where we wind up. This is what happens when we don't push back. Now, space pushes back hard. You put an inadequate product and try to put it in a spacecraft and your ship blows up. And you go, okay, that didn't work. We cut too many corners that, we need to do better for that to work. We need sort of a variation of Bruce Lee. Be like space, my friend. Be a severe critiquer of the technology that comes into your hands. Let the companies and each other know when you find problems. Complain about it loudly. Throw your money to people who seem to be doing a little bit better job than the others. Make that the thing people compete on, not the race for who has the longest list of useless features, but the one that actually does the job, does it well, doesn't confuse the owner, and is safe. The pressure, it starts with us. There is a lot, our part in this, in the horrible products we get marketed is a lot of people, their eyes glaze over and they just don't hold tech up to as high a standard as other things. If a car just spontaneously failed as often as a desktop computer does, the company would be sued out of existence. But there is no significant liability for putting out bad code. And in fact, sort of the industrial wisdom is, oh, just ship it as soon as it sort of works and let the complaints of your customers tell you what you need to actually spend time on. And they're doing it with fewer and fewer employees, apparently, because the work is falling off. I mean, they're not paying much, and they're producing lower quality. So where's that coming from? Maybe it's connected. Maybe if you don't employ as many people, maybe if you employ people of lower quality, this is what you get. All right. Well, that was that was supposed to be our palate cleanser. I guess it's just a reminder of what we can aspire to, and just how far short we've been falling of it. So take the good. Don't be discouraged by the bad. Press on, because apathy, being depressed into apathy, is one of the tools in the toolbox of those that are really hurting us all to make a little bit more money for themselves. So don't fall for that one. There is a reliance on the fact that people will ultimately feel powerless because they don't understand the technology and they don't understand why it doesn't work, and they think it's themselves being stupid and they don't want to complain about stuff. No, don't fall for it. And don't think you can't do anything about it. When people complain, legislators start hopping to it. Tech companies start hopping to it. It is achievable. And sort of in that vein, let's sneak in one more clip. This is from Smart Tech Today from the good folks at twit.tv. Smart Tech 94, talking, this from a month or two ago, but talking about the ability of Samsung to remotely brick their TVs.
This is Twit.
So we sometimes on this show talk about how having internet connected devices can be a bad thing, and that there are some downsides to it. If a company stops supporting something and it requires an online server of some sort, it requires communication with that server, how that can be an issue. And then there are these concerns where maybe there's a kill switch that's out there that they could pull or push. Do you push a kill switch or pull a kill switch? Anyway, flip the kill switch. And maybe that's the name of this episode. Anyway, Samsung apparently can remotely disable any of its TVs worldwide. So if you make a Samsung person angry, say goodbye to your TV. I'm just kidding. That's not true. That's not true. But this is an interesting piece from PC Mag. It's like, hey,
yeah,
if they needed to, they could disable. I wonder if that means that they could do the same with their refrigerators, their washing machines, all of it.
Yeah, it seems it's like it's originated from a story from South Africa where it looks like the goal is to prevent TVs from being stolen. It's like if somebody has stolen your TV and or a TV and it gets reported, they can use the serial and then basically prevent the TV from accessing that stuff. But I think it is just like, wait a second, do these all have this? And the fact that you guys are just doing this is like a weird situation. So I think it might be, there's like it's to prevent people from stealing TVs. It's probably like higher crime or something in those situations that they're dealing with. But oh yeah, I guess on July 11th there was a distribution center that was stolen. So it's like that's why they're like, oh, here's how we prevent this from operating. But everyone else is like, hey, hold on a second, you're doing what? So kind of an odd story, but.
With now that we understand kind of how it works and what it's for, but now that that's an option that's there, you wonder.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was Smart Tech 94 Samsung TV remote bricking. So the one thing missing from that story was the method. Now, presumably, it's through the internet. You turn on the TV and it phones home And then it gets the code saying, oh, your serial number is on the revoke list, kill yourself, and dies. And also, presumably it notifies the home base of the IP address at which the bricked TV was located, so maybe they can go pick up the stolen goods and maybe restore the TV. I don't know. Maybe it's more expensive if you have a restoration process, then the thieves would get a hold of that process probably and reactivate things. So it's really a matter of how deep they buried the kill switch. And also, what if you try to just use it as a TV and don't connect it to the internet? Is there, does it have some radio receiver in it that can, say, pick up a pager message or something like Amazon Sidewalk? As I never turn on the smart features of my TV. I just, I do not want it reporting what I'm watching and phoning home or doing any of the things, or like this, just like, oops, someone got cranky one day and decided to, brick all the TVs worldwide just to, stick it to their bosses before they walk out the door. These things can happen. And there's just really no reason for you as a consumer to have someone be able to reach into your home and turn off something you've paid for. Because it does not discriminate between something that's been stolen and not stolen. It's like they have the serial number, they can turn it off. And maybe that's an ability that should, expire after a little bit. It's like, okay, you've phoned home or whatever, you've preferably not recording IP addresses. And then a certain amount of time passes and you go, okay, I guess I haven't been stolen. Maybe that's something, I don't know, if I have my Samsung TV stolen, is that option available to me as perhaps a registered purchaser of it? Can I say, oh, well, I've got the serial number and I would like it turned off, please. And I'd like to know when that has happened. Is that something they're going to do? There's a whole ethics around this that, and I mean, the law is pretty much the vendor can do whatever they want. I think you could probably sue them if they turn off your TV after you've bought it. Maybe you've got one of those shrink-wrapped agreements that say, you can't do a class action lawsuit against them if anything goes wrong with their TVs. As products get more smart, say, as they use it in the sales field, maybe that gives them more room to slap a licensing agreement on it. You don't get a licensing agreement when you go buy a carton of milk, but you do perhaps if you you get a CD or you get some software. It comes with an agreement that you're considered to have agreed to, even though you haven't seen it and don't physically have access to it. So somehow that has floated. And again, I think that's something where you have to say, okay, just for commerce to work, these are the things, these are sort of standard things you're allowed to put in a shrink wrap license. And here are and anything beyond that, you actually need consent, a meaningful meeting of minds of all the parties involved, not just like you put out a take it or leave it deal that they didn't even get to read. That's the contempt that is shown towards the consumer in a legal system where we're supposed to all be equal under the law. So and again, this is the thing, the closer you get to tech, the more people eyes glaze over and they just take whatever they're given and don't complain. And they would maybe have a lot to say about, their car just suddenly turning off. And, the manufacturer turned it off remotely and they can't drive anymore. But, when that comes to your appliances, not so much. All right. And with that, you've done it again. You spent an hour talking about technology and how better understanding can lead to better outcomes at home, at work, and in your civic engagements. I hope you'll join us to continue these conversations next Wednesday and every Wednesday, noon to 1 o'clock for Northwest Tech Show.